Warm welcome. You're watching the latest coming in from around the world here on Beyond World is One. I'm Molly Gambhir. A quick look first at the top stories making headlines. Germany pledges to deliver additional air defense systems and other military equipment, as well including IRIS-T systems, as well as 300 missiles to Ukraine. China blasts President Trump's tariffs as a numbers game that will become a joke. This as Beijing raises reciprocal levies on U.S. imports to 125% and said it would go no further. Says the numbers game has no practical significance in economics. Moscow asks the U.S. to lift sanctions on its state airline Aeroflot to enable the resumption of commercial flights between the two countries. Pakistan intelligence agencies thwart a major terror plot aimed at launching a deadly assault on the strategically vital Masroor Air Force Base in Karachi, according to Pakistan media reports. The UN condemns rising cases of rape of children and sexual violence in Democratic Republic of Congo. Reports say children make up 35 to 45% of nearly 10,000 cases of rape and sexual violence reported in the first 2 months of 2025. More than 100 people killed in heavy unseasonal rains in India and Nepal over the last 2 days. At least 82 people are reported to have died in the Indian state of Bihar and 18 in Uttar Pradesh. In an embryo mix-up, Australia woman unknowingly gives birth to a stranger's baby. Clinic says she was given another patient's embryo in the clinic due to human error. Indian stocks defy global market slump. Sensex rises above 1,300 points at close, while Nifty surged over 400 points. Indian rupee also closes higher as investors grow confident of India's position in the US-China trade war.
The head of the U.S. military base in Greenland, Colonel Susanna Myers, was fired after distancing herself from the Trump administration. The U.S. military's Space Operations Command cited a, quote, loss in confidence in her ability to lead. The news comes after Myers separated herself from Vice President J.D. Vance's March visit to Greenland in an email to base personnel.
Our message to Denmark is very simple. You have not done a good job by the people of Greenland. You have underinvested in the people of Greenland, and you have underinvested in the security architecture of this incredible, beautiful landmass filled with incredible people.
Vance also accused Denmark of, quote, underinvesting in its semi-autonomous territory and leaving it vulnerable to foreign actors. Myers wrote in the email, quote, I do not presume to understand the current politics, but what I do know is the concerns of the U.S. administration discussed by Vice President Vance on Friday are not reflective of Pitifix Space Base. The email dampened the Trump administration's goal of deepening ties or even acquiring Greenland. Defense Department spokesman Sean Parnell said in a statement, quote, actions to undermine the chain of command or to subvert President Trump's agenda will not be tolerated at the Department of Defense. Space Force Colonel Sean Lee has replaced Myers.
Egg prices hit a record high in March despite optimism from the Trump administration. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index revealed Thursday a dozen grade A large eggs rose to $6.23 per dozen in March, up from $5.90 in February and $4.95 per dozen in January. The rise means consumers and businesses relying on eggs may see little relief as demand for eggs typically increases before Easter, which is on April 20th. The news comes despite White House reports of wholesale egg prices falling and optimism over dropping inflation for the month of March. Wholesale egg prices did decrease in March, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but grocery store prices have yet to follow. Economists say the rise in egg prices from January to February came from the bird flu outbreak, which led to the culling of millions of hens to stop the further spread of the virus. Some, however, expressed surprise with March's numbers as they expected prices to fall. Industry officials note wholesale prices didn't start dropping until mid-March, which may not be enough time for shoppers to see a decline in prices yet. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins also suggests that the rise in egg prices is temporary, saying the overall CPI shows a slight decline in prices for goods and services across the U.S. in March. Rollins thinks the price of eggs will soon fall in line. President Trump announced earlier this week the White House egg roll would feature real eggs again this year, despite the rise in prices. Farmers reportedly normally donate more than 30,000 eggs for the event. The administration also announced last month it would begin importing eggs from South Korea and Turkey to alleviate a supply shortage.
Good evening. Security's been ramped up on the campaign trail after revelations Peter Dutton was the target of an alleged terror plot. The Prime Minister revealed he's also been threatened, with a case now before the courts. Both leaders are tonight in Western Australia in a bid to shore up votes in the mining sector.
Campaign security stepped up. Peter Dutton closely guarded after revelations the opposition leader was the intended target of an alleged teenage terror plot.
I'm incredibly grateful to the AFP that my family are kept safe.
A 16-year-old was arrested back in August and is before court charged with terror offences, accused of buying ingredients to make bombs and testing homemade explosives. Reports the plan involved a drone.
There's no place whatsoever in politics for any of this.
The Prime Minister revealing he too has faced threats.
That is one of the reasons why you've seen an increased number of security measures put in place.
I've never felt unsafe one day in this job, particularly with the protection from the AFP, and it hasn't stopped me from doing anything, and it won't on this campaign.
A red alert on a day centred on the red dirt of Western Australia.
It's amazing what, just the scale of it.
The resource-rich state key to the nation's economy.
What we're seeing right here is the products that we're able to export that brings income to Australia, creates jobs.
And the PM's hopes of re-election.
This region is a wealth creator for our country, and the resources sector plays such an important role.
From a port in the Pilbara to the factory floor.
G'day, I'm Peter.
Peter Dutton in Perth with his own message.
The Coalition will be the best friend that WA's ever had.
A tour of an energy-intensive business that makes conveyor belts for the mines.
What are your chances in WA? It was a stronghold state for you.
I think they're strong. I think people have had enough. They're proud of their industry, they're proud of what mining contributes to our economy, and we don't exist on the East Coast without support from a strong Western Australia economy.
The Liberal leader having had breakfast with a who's who of WA's mining sector. Outside, anti-nuclear activists making their case.
You've done backflips on working from home policies, you can do a backflip on nuclear power.
The opposition leaders pitch for the suburban vote, not just petrol prices, but the very vehicles they drive.
We're not going to allow Labor's ute and car tax. We're going to repeal it, and that'll make cars cheaper.
Vowing to scrap Labor's vehicle emission standards, which would fine car manufacturers if they don't shrink the carbon footprint of their fleet.
To buy a new Ford Ranger under this government, it'll go up by $14,400 by 2029.
I find it extraordinary that Peter Dutton, who says he cares about the price of fuel, doesn't want people to have more fuel-efficient cars.
This is another dodgy distraction.
But at the close of week 2, a more serious distraction for a campaign that's been tightly managed and perhaps for good reason. Andrew Probyn, 9 News.
Election campaigns are sterile at the best of times, given they're so stage managed and parties are so risk averse. But this one is against the backdrop of a war in Europe and tensions in Middle East. And only last month, the AFP Federal Commissioner, Reece Kershaw, was warning of a record number of threats against MPs. So sadly, interactions between everyday Australians and our leaders will be ever more restricted and ever more controlled. And Georgie, that's not good for any of us, and it's certainly not good for democracy.
A man is tonight in a coma after he was attacked with a hammer at Bankstown and then tasered by police. Detectives believe they stumbled upon a vape deal that had turned violent.
On a stretcher, after being battered in Bankstown, a man viciously attacked with a hammer in what police suspect was a vape deal gone wrong. Police were called to Canterbury Road around 7:10 last night after witnesses spotted what they believed to be men with guns at an industrial complex. When officers arrived, they found an injured 56-year-old man outside.
That male was challenged by police and ultimately tasered.
Backup was called when police realised they had stumbled upon a dangerous meet-up.
It appears that there's been some violent conflict between another group that have arrived at the scene but managed to flee prior to police arriving.
One of them was caught on camera. He managed to get away. Only one man was arrested, a 44-year-old taken to Bankstown Police Station. Today, the complex remained a crime scene. Workers in other units turned away as forensics collected evidence and several luxury cars were seized. Detectives are now investigating whether one of the units inside the complex was being used as a storage facility for an illegal drug and tobacco ring. Surrounding business owners telling 9 News they were shocked to hear what had happened. No charges have been laid. At Bankstown.
From President Trump's trade war enemy, we now move to the Commander-in-Chief's 51st state interest, Canada. But this time the battlefield isn't just in politics or economics. It's playing out in the pages of comic books, where the president has been recast not as a world leader, but as a full-blown supervillain. Yes, you heard that right. In a surprising twist, President Trump has now found himself illustrated, dramatized, and caricatured in Canadian comics as the main antagonist in a bold and symbolic narrative. The president's brash rhetoric, especially his repeated threats to annex Canada and turn it into the 51st U.S. state, ignited a cultural storm north of the border. And in true comic book fashion, Canada fought back, not just with words or policies, but with a hero. Enter Captain Canuck. This 1970s superhero, originally created to embody Canadian values, strength, and independence, is now enjoying a powerful resurgence. Captain Canuck is ready to defend Canada from all threats, and even from those wearing suits and holding press briefings from the White House.
Trump gets into office and he starts talking about annexation and tariffs. And yes, all of a sudden, Canadians are looking to Captain Canuck as a symbol. And it's basically, to them, Captain Canuck symbolizes independence. No thank you, we have our own independence. We have our own symbols.
In fact, in the comics, President Trump is shown issuing aggressive ultimatums, enacting punishing tariffs, and making outrageous claims about national security and economic benefits tied to Canadian annexation.
It's got a lot of Canadians, thinking about their identity as Canadians and feeling more united as Canadians. We feel like, okay, we've got to stand in opposition to these proposals.
But the Canadian hero fights back and can be seen physically restraining the president, wagging his finger in disapproval, or dragging both President Trump and his unlikely sidekick, Elon Musk, by the collar.
I think Canada felt America had Captain America, and we should have our own. And that was the thinking. And that was my thinking. And it wasn't as if I was so super conscious of it. It was just like, okay, there's a niche to be filled here. And that was the beginning, and it was well received.
Now, even though the comic book portrayal may seem surreal, the sentiment behind it is in fact real. Canadians, long proud of their liberal views, multiculturalism, and distinct identity, are now turning to a fictional superhero to express their collective frustration and resilience. And with political tension still simmering, Captain Canuck's role has never felt more relevant or more urgent in Canada.
Friday marks 2 weeks since a massive earthquake rocked central Myanmar.
The UN says over 500,000 people lack access to life-saving health care. The magnitude 7.7 quake struck on March 28th. Myanmar's military, which grabbed power in a coup 4 years ago, says the disaster killed over 3,600 people and injured about 5,000. UNICEF says nearly 200 healthcare facilities have been damaged. It says health workers are reporting critical shortages of medical supplies.
The full picture of the damage the jolt caused remains unclear in areas held by pro-democracy forces battling the military, especially in the Sagaing region.
Aid organizations have been trying to get essential supplies to residents there, but the military is blocking access. NHK World's Kitai Genki has more.
Otsuki Misaki is from Mandalay, near the quake epicenter. She came to Japan over 20 years ago and ended up taking Japanese nationality. She works for a charity helping young people in Myanmar. Since the quake last month, she's been working with counterpart organizations operating in Sagaing and other areas, providing supplies from neighboring Mandalay and Yangon.
What do people affected by the earthquake need?
There's an urgent need for medicine, but even if we have money, it's difficult to get it. All the drugstores are closed.
Sagaing stretches vertically from north to south. Pro-democracy forces say they control much of the region. The junta announced a ceasefire last week, but airstrikes reportedly continue. Relief efforts are not allowed outside areas under military control, blocking the delivery of aid to survivors. Local charity workers say there is a severe shortage of emergency supplies. One vented his frustration toward the military.
The army has checkpoints a mile outside Sagaing city, and they're not letting anyone go beyond them. My friend's village was bombed again yesterday. I want to ask the international community to get them to stop.
Otsuki solicits donations for Myanmar online. She also plans to stand on the streets of Tokyo to collect money. She said she'll make sure all the funds she receives are put to good use.
Most hospitals aren't functional anymore, and this could result in preventable deaths. Support from the UN and other international organizations is restricted to areas authorized by the military, limiting the freedom of operations. We must do all we can to save as many lives as possible.
Otsuki is among those far from the disaster, but feeling the pain as if it were their own. Kitai Genki, NHK World.
We are joined now by NHK World's Yamaka Michitaka in Bangkok. He's been covering the earthquake story since day one. So Michitaka, it's been 2 weeks since the quake hit. What's the situation in devastated area now?
Many collapsed houses remain untouched in the Sagaing region. This is due to a shortage of large machinery and slow progress in removing debris. Food and medicine are scarce, as are tents and waterproof sheets. Under these circumstances, many residents who lost their homes are forced to live on the streets for fear of aftershocks. The rainy season begins in Myanmar next month. The UN is warning of the spread of infectious diseases such as malaria due to worsening sanitation.
So, Michitaka, the Myanmar military and pro-democracy forces announced a temporary ceasefire, but it doesn't seem to be holding. How is that affecting support for disaster areas?
Many reports say the fighting is continuing. Pro-democracy forces have accused the junta of carrying out more than 90 airstrikes and artillery bombardments on areas, including the disaster zone. The junta says pro-democracy forces are attacking military bases and naval vessels. The military is not allowing vehicles carrying medical workers and aid supplies to pass through several checkpoints, leading to areas controlled by pro-democracy forces. That's the biggest reason relief supplies aren't reaching disaster-hit areas, including the Gaing. Support is becoming increasingly uneven across different areas. A local resident I interviewed said there's less food and water with each passing day, and children and elderly people are becoming weak. Residents who face the combined hardship brought by conflict and disaster are still living under harsh conditions in shelters 2 weeks after the earthquake.
Now to the latest on the global trade war. China retaliating again overnight. The stock market wiping out many of the week's earlier gains yesterday, with the total U.S. tariff on Chinese goods now 145%. We'll have the latest from the White House in just a minute, but first we go to Whit Johnson on Wall Street. Good morning, Whit.
Hey, Rebecca, good morning to you. The head-spinning week continues here on Wall Street. U.S. futures fluctuating once again as China delivers the latest salvo in this escalating trade fight, announcing those 125% tariffs on U.S. goods to take effect tomorrow. Now, this follows the clarification that the White House put out yesterday, raising total tariffs on China to 145%. That was just one of the factors that sent the markets plunging again on Thursday, the Dow closing down more than 1,000 points. Despite the historic so-called relief rally the day before, the S&P has now lost nearly $3.5 trillion over the last 6 days. That's where millions of Americans have their 401ks and retirement accounts. Investors are trying to come to grips with a new sobering reality. The trade war with China appears to be getting worse, and some tariffs are here to stay. Overall, American consumers face an average effective tariff rate of 27% on imported U.S. goods. That's the highest since 1903. Most analysts predict that translates to higher prices for everyday items, from groceries to electronics to cars. The market's bracing for another volatile day here with so much uncertainty and no clarity about what happens next. George.
Okay, Whit, thanks very much. I want to go to the White House now. Of course, this trade war with China shows no sign of ending yet. Senior political correspondent Rachel Scott tracking the latest at the White House. Good morning, Rachel.
George, good morning to you. Yes, there is no sign that either country is backing down. In fact, China only striking back, announcing it will impose a 125% tariff on American goods.
Overnight, the trade war between the U.S. and China escalating as Beijing raises its tariffs on American goods to 125%, set to take effect tomorrow. Chinese President Xi Jinping saying there are no winners in a tariff war and warning going against the world will only result in self-isolation. President Trump acknowledging the headwinds, calling it a transition cost.
There'll always be transition difficulty.
The market rebounded after the announcement of his 90-day pause, but that was short-lived. Much of the gains wiped out as investors sold off after the rally. As a new estimate from the Yale Budget Lab says the new tariff system will cost households an average of $4,700 annually. The president insisting it will be worth it.
Again, there'll be a transition cost and transition problems, but in the end, it's going to be a beautiful thing.
With a staggering 145% tariff on Chinese goods, economists warn things could go from bad to worse if a deal isn't made. Take the iPhone 16 Pro Max, which currently has a retail price of $1,199. UBS analysts say that could jump up by $800, since most iPhones are assembled in China. Rita Panera's owns Child's Play toy shop in Washington and says the president's tariffs will force her to raise prices.
We've already had some manufacturers increase prices on us. So yesterday we saw a surcharge, as it said specifically that it was a tariff surcharge of 15% on an invoice. So we weren't notified ahead of time. time.
The tariffs China has placed on American goods in retaliation could also hurt American farmers, including in battleground states like Wisconsin that President Trump carried.
China's a big player in our market. It's up to 50%, sometimes over 50% of our soybeans from the nation goes to China, not necessarily just our soybeans.
The president has put a 90-day pause on sweeping tariffs against 85 other countries. ABC's Karen Travers asking him what happens when that time is up.
Will you put those higher tariffs in place, or will you extend the
That's
pause?
what would happen. I mean, if we can't make the deal that we want to make or we have to make, or that's, good for both parties, it's got to be good for both parties.
China retaliating with that 125% tariff, but this morning they say they will not be going any higher, saying there's no point in engaging in this tit for tat. Still, they're looking to take advantage of the fact that the United States is negotiating with other countries during this time, hoping to deepen their relationships with the European Union. Gio.
The situation getting more and more tense between America and China. All right, Rachel, thank you so much.
This is what we're talking about here. We're talking about Senator Gallego, and he joined another Democratic senator from California in signing this complaint letter right here. Now, the letter was sent to the president's chief of staff and a trade representative asking for an investigation into a potential conflict of interest.
The markets stumbled after the opening bell yesterday until President Trump announced he was rolling back most of his tariffs to 10%.
Somebody had to do what we did, and I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate.
Hours before Trump's tariff reversal kicked off a rally on Wall Street, he posted on his social media platform that everything would work out and that this is a great time to buy.
There's a lot of winning out there, and we're having a good day in the stock market, as you can see, an all-time record day, and hopefully it continues. I think it should.
The market rally led Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego and California Senator Adam Schiff to question if the president or anyone connected to him illegally profited from insider information. Quote, this sequence of events raises grave legal and ethics concerns. The president, his family, and his advisors are uniquely positioned to be privy to and take advantage of non-public information to inform their investment decisions, the senators wrote in their letter to the administration.
The question is, who knew what the president was going to do? And did people around the president trade stock knowing the incredible gyration the market was about to go through?
It's highly unlikely Gallego and Schiff's request will go anywhere. But even if there is an investigation, a local white-collar criminal defense attorney said it would be hard to prove.
The question's going to be, in this case, who knew what the president was going to do, and did people around him, trade stock knowing what the market was going to do? I think it's going to be tough to show.
And politicians have accused each other of insider trading in the past, and today the White House accused Democrats of playing partisan games with these latest accusations. Back over to you guys.
A lot of those gains yesterday totally wiped out today at the end of the day. Dennis Welch, thanks.
Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday called for stronger cooperation between his country and the European Union to resist what he termed as bullying. Xi was meeting Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, who is visiting Beijing. His remarks come as a trade war with Washington escalates, with President Donald Trump authorizing a 125% levy on Chinese exports to the U.S. During our several meetings, we have agreed that building China-Spain relations with strategic resolve and win-win cooperation is in the common and long-term interests of the two sides. At present, changes unseen in a century are unfolding across the world at a faster pace. Only through solidarity and coordination can countries promote global development and prosperity. Spain is one of China's closest partners in the European Union, with several Chinese companies, including electric car makers, announcing investments in the country. China and Spain were both targeted in Trump's sweeping tariffs, although duties on Madrid have since been suspended.
WION's assistant editor for Foreign Affairs, Siddhan Zibil, in fact, spoke with Finland's trade minister, Ville Tavio, on the tariffs imposed by the US President Donald Trump. Listen to what was said.
Trump announced the tariffs. He, of course, has paused the tariffs as well. He is going back and forth over this issue. What's Finland's position on the tariffs that were announced? How disruptive it can be for not only Finland but European Union?
The European Union has shared trade policy, so we have common talks. We are one toll area, and that's why this the amount of toll is same for everyone in the EU, and also. Of course, the effects, of course, very negatively. Everyone understands that we don't want any excess tolls. We'd actually rather move to more on the open trade. Finland is very much advocating that we've been a very free trade-minded country ever since we started our industries. And now we are hoping that that deal can be negotiated like. USA probably wants, but we are still looking the situation. You know, it's moving or changing so rapidly. So every day we have had different news this week. But it can definitely disturb the European trade, but also the global trade. So of course we are very worried about the disturbances in the global trade because that will affect everyone as well. And you have to have a certain trust in the classical economics where you understand that you cannot manufacture everything by yourself. You cannot be like that in those terms you cannot be like self-dependent. You must trade the products that you can buy and are better to produce elsewhere. So I think we cannot abandon this idea. It's the principles of our global growth. And I understand that countries, India as well now as a big country, you of course you have a certain interest to keep a lot of manufacturing, all those security related things back home as possible. But you have to be careful. There's a thin red line that when it's being crossed, that means the trade is going to stop. And then everyone's going to lose.
I'm in Muscat, the capital of Oman, where on Saturday the United States will negotiate with Iran over Tehran's rapidly advancing nuclear program. The details of these talks remain closely held, but what is known is that Iran has been enriching uranium to near weapons-grade levels and has a stockpile that the United Nations warned could be enough for it to build several nuclear weapons should it choose to do so. In the lead-up of these talks, we saw President Donald Trump write a letter to Iran Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as well as we've seen Iranian officials come back and offer kind of positive comments about the talks, that they could succeed, that they could go forward. But looming in the background is Trump's threat that a military strike against Iran is possible if these talks don't succeed. So as of right now, the US and Iran have put their trust in Oman to be the mediator, and whether or not these tensions in the Middle East that have been escalated by the Israel-Hamas war in the Gaza Strip go even further will likely depend on what happens at the negotiating table here in Muscat.
የሀገር መከላከያ ሰራዊት አባል ነበርኩኝ ብያለሁኝ። የሀገር መከላከያ ሰራዊት አባል ሆኜ በማይበት ሰዓት ከራስ በፊት ለህዝብና ለሀገር የሚለውን መርህ ጥሰን እየተንቀሳቀስን ህዝብ ተነጥሎን ከህዝብ ጎን አለመቆማችንና የአንድ ፓርቲ ብቻ መቆሙ ተቋሙ ገባኝና ከህዝብ ጎን መሆን አለብን ብለን አማራ ብቻ ተበደለ ሳይሆን አጠቃላይ ኢትዮጵያውያን የሚፈልጉት ለውጥ ነው ብለን ስለምናስብ ይሄ ስለታየኝ ወደ ትግሉ ተቀላቅያለሁ።
በዚህ 18 ወራት ጊዜ ውስጥ በርካታ የቡድን መሳሪያዎችን ታጥቀናል። በርካታ የጠላት ሰራዊት ማርከናል። 80% እና ከዛ በላይ የሚሆነውን የአማራ ክልል የሚባለውን ቀጠና ግዛቶችን ሙሉ በሙሉ ተቆጣጥረናል። በሺ የሚቆጠሩ አውደ ውጊያዎችን አድርገናል። በእነኛ አውደ ውጊያዎች በሙሉ ትናንሽም ትላልቅም ድሎች አግኝተናል። ከፍተኛ ወታደራዊ መኮንኖችን ማርከናል። የፕሪቶሪያው ስምምነት ተኩስ በማስቆሙ ወይም ደግሞ የተኩስ ማቆም ውጤት በማምጣቱ መልካም ቢሆንም በኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ግን ዘላቂ ሰላም በማምጣት እንደገና መከለስ እንደገና መታየት እንዳለበት እናምናለን። የፋኖ ጦርነት ወይም ደግሞ የትግል ኢሚዲየት ኮዝ ግን የአብይ አህመድ ወረራ እንጂ የፕሪቶሪያ አግሪመንት እንዳልሆነ መታወቅ አለበት።
Sudan accused the United Arab Emirates at the United Nations highest court on Thursday, alleging that it is violating the Genocide Convention by providing arms and financial support to the rebel paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces committing crimes against the Masalit people in the Darfur area.
The direct logistic and other support that the UAE has provided and continue to provide it to the RSF and their affiliated militia has been continue to be the primary driving force behind genocide now taking place.
Sudan seeks to have the International Court of Justice issue urgent provisional measures directing the UAE to take all necessary actions to prevent violence and other crimes against the Masalit people in Darfur. Foreign ministers from the Gaza Contact Group emphasized the need for a lasting ceasefire and opposed displacement of the Palestinians from their homes on Friday. Representatives from Palestine, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Bahrain, Qatar, Jordan and Indonesia convened for a 3-day diplomatic forum in Antalya. The expulsion of the Palestinian people from their territory would lead to the dissolution of their cause, which is precisely what the Israeli side desires, as they claim there is land without people. Therefore, we have a crucial obligation to support the Palestinian people in their effort to maintain their land by advocating for a ceasefire and ending the starvation policies and systematic violence perpetrated by Israel. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan remarked that Israel's decade-long violence against Palestinians has not produced any positive outcome. We discussed what steps could be taken within the international community to ensure a lasting peace and establish a two-state solution. A permanent ceasefire must be achieved as soon as possible. More than 50,800 Palestinians have died in Gaza since the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks. The military campaign has left the enclave in ruins and rendered it almost inhabitable.
The world's biggest asset management company has warned of a recession as markets react to global uncertainty and escalating China-US tariff war. The CEO of BlackRock is not mincing his words. Larry Fink has said that the US may already be in a recession. Now, speaking after China announced a sharp ramp-up in tariffs on American goods up to 125%, Fink has painted a sobering picture of economic uncertainty and market chaos. The fears of a slowdown have intensified after Trump unveiled sweeping tariffs last week, igniting a global sell-off that saw U.S. markets spiral. The brief optimism following a 90-day tariff pause was evaporated on Thursday. Markets managed to rally, but by Friday, the rally had fizzled out. The US dollar has plunged, losing its footing as a global safe haven. It's fallen to a decade low against the Swiss franc and a 3-year low against the euro. At the same time, borrowing costs have surged, sending shockwaves through the bond markets already jittery over potential economic contraction. The volatility is more than just the market noise. It also reflects deep structural anxiety. Investors are no longer betting on a soft landing. They're bracing for a hard impact.
What's more, the tariff war with China is escalating. This is a real problem. So the market is concerned that the trade war between the world's two largest economy powers, the US and China, will cause the global economy to fall into recession. This is real concern.
So as analysts remain cautious amidst the turmoil, American consumer sentiment has also plummeted to the second lowest level on record since 1952. The Americans have not been this pessimistic about the US economy in nearly 73 long years, not even during the Great Recession of 2008.
A lot of happiness right now. It's a lot of concern, a lot of, what's going to happen. Are we going to be able to have a job? And obviously looking at the future, I think all these things are going to be affecting mom and pop's businesses as it is Since the tariffs were announced, I noticed that a lot of business have been closing.
And Fink's warning, of course, comes as a brutal reality check. BlackRock, which manages trillions of dollars globally, has said that the U.S. economy is on very thin ice. And in Fink's words, may have already cracked through, with tariffs rising, confidence falling, and also markets seesawing. America may not just be close to a recession, it may already be knee-deep in a recession.